Welcome to the Explore Words, Discover Worlds podcast, presented by Bradford Literature Festival. In this episode, we're joined by legendary British singer-songwriter Richard Thompson, with a career spanning over 55 years. Thompson delves into his musical journey, reflecting on influences and collaborations with icons like Sandy Denny, Jimi Hendrix and Nick Drake. Recorded at the 2023 Bradford Literature Festival, this episode offers a glimpse into the life and artist history of a true musical legend.
Thank you, everybody, and good evening. Welcome to the studio here and the Bradford Literature Festival. I am trusting that you're out there, given your applause. I can see nothing but the front row, but it was a very warm welcome indeed, and I'm not so presumptuous to think that was for me. I'm sorry, I have something in my eye now. We're all here, including myself, of course, brought together by the wonderful music and the wonderful life of Richard Thompson. For those of you who haven't already, and I hope that you haven't necessarily, because they are available for sale afterwards.
Signed. Or will be soon, anyway.
Yes. Signed by him, not me. B-Swing, Fairport, Folk, Rock, and Finding My Voice, 1967 to 1975. Those years have great resonance for me because 67 was the year of my birth, and 1975 was the year that I left the UK for the US at the age of 8 for the obvious tax shelter reasons. First of all, what a wonderful memoir, and your prose in writing it. I'd like to begin certainly in 1967, when I believe you turned 19. You can do the math on that.
I was 18 actually. Yeah.
18.
Yeah.
Sorry. Okay. I was giving you an extra year there, but okay. When it comes to influences, we oftentimes think of other musicians later on in life, but really some of our earliest formations of music come from family. And you provide this anecdote of going to your grandfather's house, and your description of what you find in the attic is really fascinating.
Yeah. I think I was about 3, and I think my parents both wanted to be up in the attic so they wouldn't leave me down in the house, so they dragged me up as well. Because this was a new part of the house I'd never been to. It was very exciting. And so I'm looking at these, dusty old toys and things. Most attics have dusty old toys and things lying around from previous childhoods usually. And my dad opens up this case, and inside the case there's this box with strings on it. That's how I saw it at the time. And he takes it out and he plays a few, jazz chords. And I didn't know it was jazz chords at the time either. It sounds just fabulous, and he plays it for about 2 minutes and then puts it back in the box. And I never saw it again. And I think he must have sold it. He played a bit of guitar. But the nice thing was that he was a jazz fan. He went to see Django and the Quintet de Hot Club, I think probably in London, actually, in the 30s, probably 37, 38. He saw Louis Armstrong in Glasgow. He was from the Scottish borders. So him and his friends had formed a jazz club, and they went up en masse to see Louis Armstrong, again in the 1930s. So, in amongst the less exciting and predictable records in the house, you had Duke Ellington and Django Reinhardt and Les Paul records. In among the Glenn Miller and the Pearl Carr and Teddy Johnson and the show tunes. Everybody had show tunes. So the Oklahoma, Carousel, all that stuff. So that was a really interesting thread. that I didn't necessarily pay attention to, but it was definitely there in the back of my mind. And I remember when I started playing the guitar, slowing down Django 33 and a third to 17 and whatever it was. It was half of
a sixth.
Two-sixths.
Where's my math people?
What's half of 33 and a third? Thank you.
By the way, countdown is right after this.
To try and learn Django's solos, which were still impossible at half speed. So I figured rock and roll was easier to play, and that was the other thread in the house, with my big sister, who was 5 years older than me, who from the age of probably 11, 12, was into Bill Haley and Elvis, and whatever came next. And she had some great records. She had all the dark rock and roll, as I call it, the dark stuff. Gene Vincent, Jerry Lee Lewis, all the bad boys, which I just loved. It was kind of the answer to being a post-war teenager. Your parents wanted it safe. They'd been through the hell of war for 6 years, and they wanted a quiet life. But their kids didn't. Their kids wanted to rebel and have loud, fast, primitive music. So begone saccharine saxophones of the 40s. Let's have it wild and let's slash some cinema seats while we're at it.
So. Goals. This whole idea, though, about generations. I mean, were you sort of just simply rebelling, saying, "I'm not going to listen to my parents' music"? I mean, as you would say, Vera Lynn relegated to the dustbin of history, or was it that you were, as you said, just a teenager with other influences, like your sister, and I think you also mentioned in the book her boyfriends.
Well, yeah. It was certainly a considerable amount of rebellion. My sister and I were both, I'd say, rebels. We really fought against our parents in a very serious way. I should also mention French music in the house, because my father didn't get demobilized until 1947. He was doing something sort of secret in Antwerp until 1947. Yeah, you've seen The Third Man, a film, The Third Man? Okay, he was kind of doing the equivalent in Antwerp as the film portrays in Vienna. So it's kind of rounding up Nazis and contraband and all that kind of stuff. But he came back with a pile of French 78s, La Mer by Charles Trenet, Jean Sablon, Edith Piaf, all stuff which I love to this day. Just this wonderful French music at a time when French music was uncorrupted by rock and roll. I think it really went downhill when Johnny Hallyday came along. It just wasn't as interesting. But back to my sister's boyfriends. My sister had a succession of boyfriends who would come over the house to collect her on a date, and she will be invariably late. She's still late. She could be an hour, 2 hours late for anything. It's just she's got her own rhythm, but she's very good at keeping restaurants open past their closing time. She's an expert at that. The boyfriends will come round, and there's a guitar sitting there, so that they pick up the guitar and they teach me how to play like the Buddy Holly songs of the day, how to play Shadow stuff. So that was great. That was a real introduction to the guitar for me, and stood me in good stead.
So you were absorbing music from so many different genres and so many different people. By the way, who has an older sibling who was a major music influence on your taste? All right. I'm only saying that because my younger sister is in the audience.
95% of the audience.
And although I can't see if she even raises her hand, she'd better. You also had schoolmates who were not only influential, but some of them turned out to be rather famous in their own regard.
It did. Well, I was in a class at my school, William Ellis School in North London. And one of my classmates was Hugh Cornwell, who formed a band called the Stranglers, who did quite well. They had lots of hits in the 70s and 80s. and Hugh and I are still friends. We didn't see each other for 40 years, and then we were both playing a festival in Spain. And it's like, oh, how are you? Oh, good. Now, can I remind you of what you were saying 40 years ago, and let's just get back to that. So it's like picking up the conversation that we finished, when we left school. But, when we left school, I really didn't see him. But at school, we formed a band. I suppose I taught Hugh to play the bass. I played guitar. A kid called Nick Jones was our drummer, the son of Max Jones from the Melody Maker, the jazz critic of the Melody Maker. And Nick would get all the demo 45s that got sent to Melody Maker, and we'd sift through those for good songs. So we had an unusual repertoire for a school band of 15-year-old kids. So that was fun, yeah. And I suppose one of the nice things about being in a group is that you learn from each other, and you influence each other. That's why the Beatles were so great. That they played enough with each other on the road, that they got kind of bedded in, which I think it doesn't happen as much these days in popular music. But you can tell the bands that just played with each other, and they just knew the quirks of each other. And you learn to accommodate the fact that the rhythm guitar player is slightly behind the beat, and the drummer's snare is slightly in front of the beat. You just develop this thing where you know what each other are doing, and it all fits together like a jigsaw, and sounds great. A lot of those Liverpool bands had that thing where they could do that, and a lot of the London bands. It was a good time, and it was a great time for live music because there were so many places to play. And you had that opportunity to play live a lot, seven nights a week if you wanted to.
So here's the Beatles that come along when you are a teenager, and so really kind of that perfect storm. You had guitar tutors like Pete introducing you to people like Ida Presti and even Andre Segovia, the great virtuoso. So you're also being exposed to technical mastery of guitar, not just screaming out 3 chord progressions and singing yeah.
At least 4 chords, I think.
Okay, overachiever,
the
but okay.
fourth one has come in very handy over the years.
Okay.
Being in London was handy because you really were at that point, at the crossroads of teenage music culture and fashion. Gene Shrimpton, David Bailey, the Avengers TV series, Carnaby Street, Kings Road. This is the world focus of fashion and the world focus of music. Thanks to people like the Beatles. So it was great to be there, even if we were a generation later. We weren't the Rolling Stones of Beatles generation, but we were like 5 years behind them. But still, there was that cachet about music from London. When Fairport went to America as late as 1970, it was still a bit special to be from England. That was an interesting thing. I forgot what the question was.
Well, no, I think you answered it perfectly as far as technique of classical guitar and all. Being in London, you could go and see classical music. You could go and see Andre Segovia. You could go and see Joe Herriot's Indo-Jazz fusions, an experimental jazz East meets West band. That was wonderful. You could see pretty much anybody in a folk club. You could see Martin Carthy. You could see the Watersons. It was an amazing smorgasbord of musical styles, and I think when you're young, you're influenced by everything, or you can pick and choose what you want to be influenced by, and that was wonderful. So 1967 comes around. You're 18.
Mm-hmm.
3 consequential things happen that year. Sgt. Pepper comes out.
Mm-hmm.
You form the Fairport Convention.
Mm-hmm. Yes. I think that was one of those pivotal years. Jimi Hendrix, I think he moved to London in 66, but he was starting to have an influence in 67. Fairport only became Fairport in May of 67, but by September 67, we're already signed to a record contract. and we're playing opening spots for Pink Floyd and The Crazy World of Arthur Brown, etc., etc. So it was a very quick evolution in many ways. And I think Fairport's virtue was just the fact that we tried to be different. We tried to not be a blues band. We tried to not be a soul band, which were the main flavours of the time. And I think that gave us a certain reputation. And I think we stayed that way. I mean, we stayed as a band that had an unusual approach and an unusual repertoire.
Now, people are, of course, always looking to pigeonhole bands, maybe because that's the section in the record store that you can easily find them. Fairport was at one point even called the British Jefferson Airplane.
Yeah.
I'm not sure I really hear that. Yeah, right?
No, not remotely, no.
Much better than being called the British Jefferson Starship. That would be really out of bounds.
Or the British Osmonds, that would have been.
I don't know, the thought of you landing at Heathrow and all of these screaming girls coming and trying to tear off your clothes,
I could handle it. That'd be okay.
Okay. Well, I don't think you're the long-haired lover from Liverpool either, so I remember seeing those scenes of carnage on TV when I was a kid. But this was a time when you had people like Bob Dylan, you had people like Joni Mitchell. Oftentimes Fairport is categorized, and I'm saying this again from record stores and where to find you, would usually be put into folk or folk rock. What was the cross-pollination of this time? I mean, with people like Dylan and Mitchell producing some incredible music.
Yeah. I think in Fairport we were always interested in lyrics, and from our formation, we loved to play Dylan songs and Joni Mitchell songs. We got hold of Dylan's demos, the basement tapes, quite early on. We just phoned Dylan's publisher and said, "Have you got any unreleased Bob Dylan songs?" They said, "Oh yeah, just come over to the office." And they gave us a stack of acetate recordings, which became the basement tapes. Same with Joni Mitchell. They gave us all the stuff before she'd even made a record. They gave us all her demos. So that was nice. And we should give probably the most credit to Bob Dylan as the person who made popular music intelligent lyrics in popular music. Through his own music, through versions of his songs by the Byrds, through his influence on the Beatles, especially on John Lennon. It made it okay to sing political songs, to sing songs that weren't just about teenage love. They're about deeper things, social things, other kinds of emotion that hadn't been expressed in popular music for a long time. So all credit to Bob for that. And then on the back of Dylan, you had Eve of Destruction and all these kind of psychedelic, word-heavy songs that came along, some of which were good, some of which were not so good. But that was a real turning point in popular music, and I think for Fairport we're very keen on the lyrical side of that. We love the idea of intelligent lyrics and of trying at that point then to start writing our own songs with intelligent lyrics.
Did you find that you were in competition, or were you complimenting some of these other musicians that were out there at this time? If you heard like say a Dylan track, said, "Oh, you know what? I gotta beat that." You know the very famous thing about how Dylan and John Lennon went back and forth with Norwegian Wood and Fourth Time Around, or the Beatles with the Beach Boys trying to one up each other. Yeah. Did you ever feel that with any musician?
I don't think we did. We didn't feel certainly didn't feel that kind of competition with American bands who were the ones who were really. Singing the intelligent lyrics, but bands like the Byrds, maybe Love with Arthur Lee, we didn't really feel that close a connection because they were geographically very distant. And in the UK, we didn't really feel there was anybody in our particular field that we were ploughing. The UK, the underground London scene, whatever you want to call it, the sort of psychedelic scene, where it was very very friendly and very mutually supportive. But I think we saw everybody as quite distinct. You know, the Crazy World of Arthur Brown was one unique thing, and Pink Floyd were another unique thing. Blossom Ties were another unique thing. The Social Deviants were another unique thing. But they were just kind of friends and people you'd meet on the M1, you know, on the motorway, or in Bob's Cafe on the A6, you know. But it wasn't really not competitive. No.
I mentioned that Sgt. Pepper came out in 1967 when Fairport formed. Revolver, of course, I know you talk about it. And I mean, these albums are really known for their studio engineering. And I was struck by how on Book Song, it seemed as though you were borrowing some of the Beatles' sleight of hand and their mastery in the studio.
Yeah. Well, on that album, on the What We Did in Our Holidays album, I'm almost going back to Les Paul, actually, which I heard when I was a very, very small child, from my dad's record collection. So using half-speed, double-speed guitar, running the tape backwards, all that kind of stuff, really came from Les as much as from the Beatles. But it was that time, and we were very happy to finally, I think, get to 8 tracks, on the recording machine. Up from 4, I think our first album was 4 tracks, second album might have been 8 tracks, so you got, wow, if we put the drums on 2 tracks, blah, 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 blah. Oh, we've got 2 tracks left, let's put a backward guitar in there, let's add a cello over here. It was exciting stuff. And the nice thing about those days was, the more tracks you got, the more you could say, well, we'll mix it later. When you only had 4 tracks, you had to say, okay, we have to pre-mix the rhythm guitar and the hi-hat, and we have to pre-mix, the bass and the bass drum. So you had to make earlier decisions that made the mixes quirkier, but somehow more distinctive. It was a good thing and a bad thing. And every time you did a mix, it was live. And now you can automate the mixes and just get them absolutely perfect. But in the old days of live mixing, you'd say, okay, could you ride up the guitar solo, and can you just ride down the bass a little bit on that passage? So it was like all these hands coming onto the mixing desk, they're doing that little bit. And at the end of the mix, you go, how was that for you? Oh, it's great. Okay, fantastic. But every mix was different, so it was kind of live and lots of fun in many ways.
Now you also bring in a female voice with Sandy Denny. What was the impetus for that? I mean, it certainly changed the sound of Fairport.
Well, we'd always had a female vocalist. Before Sandy, we had Judy Dybel. And it was one of the things that made us distinctive as a band. And when Judy left, we thought, well, perhaps we should keep that going, keep that distinction. The fact that Sandy, auditioned for us and just blew us away, really helped us to continue that. She was a pretty extraordinary presence, amazing singer, and lots of fun as a human being. And I think even today, I listen back to old Fairport records, and I think that's really quite something. What Sandy was doing, a great legacy.
I mean, I was listening to Legion Life, which was, I believe, the 4th Fairport album, A Sailor's Life. I mean, and as you said, I mean, lyrics very, very vivid, and I can hear the influence on bands like Led Zeppelin, and I believe that Sandy did sing with Led Zeppelin on the Battle of Evermore, as well. So a bit of cross-pollination.
I hear a lot of female singers, quote Sandy as a pioneer, really in the music business. She put up with a lot, but she really plowed a fresh furrow there, I think. Lots of people, Kate Bush, quotes her as an influence. A lot of singers quote her as an influence, and rightly so. And I think she should be better known. I think she'd be up there with the Carole Kings and the Joni Mitchells in people's minds as one of the great singer-songwriters.
Well, I mean, sometimes it's not that easy for people to necessarily appreciate influence. I think it was Brian Eno said that only 20,000 people bought the Velvet Underground's first album, but every one of them went out and formed a band.
Yeah. Terrifying thought.
Well, some of them didn't work out. But just the idea that sometimes influences may not be as explicit. As I said, sometimes when I listen to Fairport, I can hear you in bands. The Pink Floyd album Metal, especially the song Fearless. I mean, I can hear the chord progressions. I can hear the sort of the detail to lyrics in something like that. 1969 was a tough year for you and for Fairport. You suffered 2 tragedies.
We lost our drummer in a car crash, and that was a huge watershed for the band. We didn't know if we were going to carry on, and we thought very long and hard about what we were going to do as a band. And we decided that we'd been talking a bit about doing a project album of British traditional music performed with electric instruments. And we said, well, this is the time to do it. Let's just forget the old repertoire. We don't want to play what we've been playing with our drummer, Martin. That'd be too painful to go back over that stuff. But so let's work on this new project. We'll bring in Dave Swarbrick. We'll bring in Dave Mattox on drums, and that became the Legion Leaf album. So it was. It would have happened sooner or later, but it did force our hand, I think somewhat, to this big change of direction.
Now, you're so closely associated with Fairport, but by 1971 you leave Fairport. I mean, a mere 4 years or maybe even less from the time that you formed the band, and you go solo. Yeah,
I think. I think that motorway accident affected all of us more than we admitted at the time. They didn't send you to therapy back then. It was still the sort of the World War II mentality of, you're okay, you're going to be all right, just get on with it, stiff upper lip and all that stuff. So I think we struggled. I mean, Ashley had a kind of nervous breakdown. I think Sandy was really upset by the whole thing. I think I just I needed some alone time. I think actually was what it was down to. A musical alone time. I've been in bands since I was 12, and I think I wanted to see what would happen if I wasn't in a band. If I was just writing music for my own pleasure and for my own performance.
But I mean, walking away from a band that had a fairly quick progression on an ascent, that couldn't have been easy.
It was incredibly difficult, yeah. We've talked about all that stuff since. I talked with Ashley and Simon about the accident and the effect it had on us, and I think we all said, well, if we just thought about it, we wouldn't. No one would have left the band. Sandy would have stayed. I would have stayed. Ashley would have stayed. But we weren't thinking right. We weren't thinking straight. It's PTSD or whatever.
Well, one of the things that you've mentioned is that perhaps shortly after this time, as you're searching for something, perhaps philosophically or spiritually, you actually land on something.
Well, I did, yeah. There was a wonderful bookshop in London called Watkins. It's up a little alley, Cecil Court alley, just full of these sort of quirky old shops selling sheet music and books and stuff. It's a bit Harry Potter, in fact. And Watkins is an esoteric bookshop. It's still there, and they do astrology and God knows what, and you can get your tarot cards there and all this stuff. So I started visiting there when I was about 15. Out of curiosity, and I picked up a book called Zen Flesh, Zen Bones, and it contained these little, they're called koans, those little short things, yeah. And the sound of one hand clapping kind of stuff, and I started reading these, and I thought, well, that's really interesting. I love this stuff, but the only way you can decode these things is to become a different person. You're never going to get it intellectually, so something in you has to change. So I started reading everything in Watkins' bookshop. I was their best customer for about 5 years. And I went from A for astrology to Z for Zen, all stops in between. And
I'm sorry, but if you're just simply reading the books there, then you're not really a customer.
I did buy them.
Okay, okay. Just checking.
It wasn't sitting on the floor.
Okay.
And I kind of paused at people like Gurdjieff and Ouspensky. I thought that's interesting, And then I read like Pierre Vilayat Khan, Richard Field, the people who kind of, I think it was called Sufism, and I thought, well, that's interesting. And as I'd read it and enjoy it and then think, well, these seem to be the people who actually have the knowledge, today, not 1,000 years ago, but right now, these people seem to still have a tradition that contains knowledge. But it was all in my head. The whole thing was in my head. Should I read?
Please,
something? Okay, yeah.
Yes.
I'll just read how the world came to me rather than me having to look for it. I had paused in my trek through the shelves of Watkins at the letter S. This is from my book, by the way, in case you were wondering. This isn't my book. It comes hardbound.
Yours will come like this.
Through the shelves of Watkins at the letter S. The Sufis were much quoted elsewhere. Sufism as an influence on the Kabbalah, as being that which Rumi taught, as being the thing that certain Western groups in the US and Britain practiced with varying degrees of authenticity. I had over the years read books by Pierre Vilayat Khan and the Englishman Richard Field, who I was intrigued to find out was a former member of the Springfields vocal group, alongside Dusty. I was also reading stories about Nasruddin, a kind of Middle Eastern folk hero. Much of the content of these books struck me as Zen-like, cryptic, as poetry is cryptic, hinting at something greater where words fail. I learned that the real Sufis were spread throughout the Islamic world and fell into various sects. I wanted to find out more about them, but it remained a thought only. At the same time, I was developing a love for things Middle Eastern, as I romanticized the world described by Gurdjieff and Ouspensky, Richard Burton and T.E. Lawrence. As can happen in life if one is fortunate, what I was looking for, but was too distracted to seek out, came to me. In Time Out magazine, there was an ad for a Sufi meeting in a church hall in Belsize Park in London. I was not working that night. I went along to watch. It was 300 yards from my flat. The 30-odd participants, men and women, were singing what was clearly a work of devotion, in unison, without accompaniment. A couple of followers were passing around cups of mint tea. It was intense but loose, and in no way precious. As I sat on the outer fringes, I began to recognize faces. There was Ian Whiteman, Roger Powell, and Mike Evans, all from the band Mighty Baby, who I had played many sessions with. There was Peter Sanders, who had taken many live photographs of Fairport. They smiled in recognition. As the intensity built, the whole assembly got to their feet and performed a kind of dance in a circle, in which the intense, rhythmic breathing seemed to be important. Afterwards, we sat and chatted and drank more tea and caught up. I told them about all that had led me to that meeting, reading Richard Field, Pierre Vilayat Khan, Tales of Nasruddin, but they looked blankly at me as if unfamiliar with anything I was referring to. They invited me for lunch the next day at their Zawiya, literally a corner, a Sufi centre. The food was delicious, and the room we ate in seemed to have some magnetic force, like standing next to a meteorite. I visited often and felt at home there. I attended more nights of dhikr, invocation. It was explained to me, and I really had not figured it out, that Sufism was the inner core of Islam. I started practicing the prayer, collectively or on a borrowed prayer mat at home, and with the first prostration realized that this was something I had wanted to do my whole life. Surrender, submit, hand over to the universe my ego, my conflicts, my troubles. Someone said that water takes on the color of the glass into which it is poured. A Christian glass, a Buddhist glass, a Muslim glass. The same water, just the outside trappings and methods are different. This all seemed to me like coming home after a long journey. There was no conversion as you would change your pounds into euros, just affirmation that this was who I had always been, and this was the relationship with the universe I had always had.
This was a time, I think, particularly here in Britain in the mid-70s, where other musicians were also on a journey, seeking something spiritually. I mean, Cat Stevens with his just immense success, Tea for the Tillerman in 1972, of course, his journey toward Islam. Pete Townsend very famously becomes a disciple of Meher Baba. George Harrison with Hinduism. It seems as though people were going to something outside what was the structure of religion and philosophy in Great Britain.
Yeah, I think at that time people were not finding the answers they wanted in Christianity, or at least the Christianity they were brought up with. I was raised Presbyterian, and it wasn't answering the questions that I had. But perhaps in another way, Christianity would have worked for me, but I couldn't really see it. And it's interesting that so many Westerners were looking at that time for something different. A lot of people went to India or Indian traditions. Sachi Sai Baba. And you had that Oriental influence on music. Ravi Shankar became well known in the West. George Harrison was playing sitar on Beatles records. It was a whole other world. I took sitar lessons in 1967, as you had to. It was almost compulsory. With the head of Oriental Studies at London University, and every weekend there'd be a house concert at his house, and all these Indian musicians would do a tour of the UK that you'd never hear about. You'd never know about it, because it was all house concerts all the way through. And the most extraordinary musicians, it could be seen on any weekend at Nazir's house. It's just absolutely fabulous and a real learning experience. Wonderful stuff. And I can never quite pin down where that's looking eastward or outside of Britain anyway, and outside of Christianity. I never quite figure out where that started. Somewhere in the 60s, but I don't know where.
How did that influence your music?
Sorry?
How did that influence your music with this move towards Sufism?
It's interesting. When I became interested in Sufism, the branch of Sufism that I followed, and that this London group followed, came from North Africa. It came from Meknes and Fez in Morocco. But it's kind of all over the Morocco, Algeria, Tunisia.
Was this the Tajanis?
Sorry?
Or was it the Tajanis?
No, it was Dakawi.
Okay.
Yeah, the Dakawi Habibia. And when we listened to their music, it didn't sound Oriental. It sounded kind of Western. And used familiar scales for the most part. So it wasn't alien. It was just the forms were different. Can't quite describe it, but that music, the music in North Africa to this day, what they call traditional North African music, comes from a time when the Moors were in Spain, and there's a strong theory that actually Moorish music. It's a music of nostalgia as well, a music of loss, music of chivalry, really influenced the troubadours in France and the trouvères and the Meistersingers. So it possibly had a big influence on European music. So perhaps that's one of the reasons it doesn't sound alien to us, that it was already had infiltrated into Europe quite early on, probably by about 11th, 12th century. This is a theory, but I think it's a fairly good theory.
Well, I mean, Moorish music influences Segovia, and so you're going to hear in the classical music of Segovia that then is brought forward. But you have been adventurous in also paying homage, if you will, to British medieval music, the music of the troubadours here, the chord progressions and some of the technical work that you do. So for you, it's not just about space; it's also looking at music chronologically and bringing back.
Yeah. Someone remarked that all British art, music, painting, etc., is about the landscape. It's about what England looks like. It's about the hills and the hedges and the trees and if you think about it, Vaughan Williams went back to so certainly the 16th century. We might not know that about Greensleeves if it wasn't for Vaughan Williams actually doing an arrangement of it. And he went back, for variations on the theme by Thomas Tallis. Thomas Tallis, I think, also 16th century. Vaughan Williams went back to go forwards. His variations, it's a modern piece of music, but it's not like Schoenberg, it's not like Ravel. It's something quite English and unique, and it is about that British sentimentality for Britain. What Britain looks like, what Britain feels like. This tradition of Britain, what we think Britishness is. So it's there in Vaughan Williams. It's there in some of the other British composers. It's there in a lot in Benjamin Britten. Yes.
Yeah, I got that sense also from people like Ritchie Blackmore, most famously of Deep Purple, going off and now seemingly acting as though he's touring Renaissance festivals with this very medieval tune, but using a Stratocaster, not a lute, in order to do that, and somehow it works. I was wondering if you might be enticed to play something.
Well, I could play something. Yes.
Okay. Unlike me, that guitar shouldn't be a prop. So.
Yeah. What should I play? Well,
if you don't mind. Okay.
Let me see. I could play something. Well, play something historical or two. Yeah. Well, I could play something, but I could play a Fairport song. That might be fun. This is it's a song I wrote when I was 18 years old, and I think it points forward. I think it points to that kind of spiritual interest that I had at that age, that I hadn't quite resolved. I hadn't quite figured out where it was going, but it's a song of projection into the future. We used to say there'll come the day we'd all be making songs or finding better words. These ideas never lasted long. The way is up along the road, the air is growing thin. Too many friends who tried swept up this mountain with the wind. Meet on the ledge, we're gonna meet on the ledge. When my time is up, I'm gonna see all of my friends. Meet on the ledge, gonna meet on the ledge. If you really mean it, all comes around again. And now I see I'm all alone. That's the only way to be. You'll have your chance again, then you can do the work for me. Meet on the ledge, we're gonna meet on the ledge. When my time is up, I'm gonna see all of my friends. Oh, meet on the ledge, gonna meet on the ledge. If you really mean it, it all comes around again.
I'm struck by the fact that, first of all, you wrote that at 18. The other fact is that it was 1967, and you have this way of making some more traditional chord progressions sound modern, and in some ways, this is the kind of music that I seem to remember more familiarly with maybe 5-6 years later. It sounds like almost like a precursor to people like Cat Stevens and even some of the work that Zeppelin was doing. Very much a bridge between those two eras and worlds.
I'm far too modest to comment. Really.
That's why I'm doing it. Yeah, that's my job. Thanks.
Well, the great trick in popular music, which I rarely succeed with, is to make something familiar, just slightly different. You just juxtapose an element or two, and it comes out as a new thing. A lot like ABBA were geniuses at doing that kind of thing. We take something that's predictable, and the chords have been used a million times, but you just turn it around a tiny, tiny bit. Anyway.
Well, I mean, the fact that you were adventurous enough to even find the beauty in a song like Britney Spears' "Oops, I Did It Again." This is true. It's on YouTube.
It's on YouTube. Okay, it must be true. It's on YouTube.
Yeah, go.
Does that mean that everything that all those Donald Trump videos are true as well?
You know, if Trump were to try to sing that song, we could talk about that. But
if Donald Trump sang a Britney Spears song, I'd have a lot more respect for him. Actually,
might actually have some new votes. But the fact that you are obviously then still maybe aficionado would be a bit of a strong word, but you are an active listener to music that is still being produced now. I mean, albeit this was probably from the mid-'90s with Miss Spears. What do you see in the music today?
Well, the thing is that you never stop learning. If you think you know it all, you might as well just quit right there and then. You really have to be a student for life, for absolutely forever. And there's always stuff to learn. There's always things you don't know, always things you don't know, about harmony and about life. Yo-Yo Ma said, first become a good human being, and then maybe you can become a good musician. So if you run out of chords, you can always start on yourself.
Was there, and this might be a little bit controversial, but was there anyone that you felt wasn't doing it right musically, that metaphorically or literally turning the radio dial off?
I have a list here. I'm really, I'm not a good person to ask that question because I hate everything. I really do. I hate 95% of music. And it annoys me that music is so ubiquitous. You can't get rid of it sometimes. My idea of a good time is to put on, like one Maria Callas track and just listen to it really loud, and then I'm done for the day. That's me. That's fine. That's wonderful. I think in my perception, most people get it wrong. But that's good, I think, for me. I'm super critical, honestly. But I think that drives me forward. And makes me work harder, and say to myself, okay, well, if that's no good, what are you going to do? And this is me arguing with myself. But oh golly, help. Even people that I admire and love. I mean, I might say, well, okay, I don't like that song. I like that song, but not that one. Not that one. Not. So I'm not a good person to ask. But thank you for asking.
Most welcome. Is there a song that's out there that you listen to and you say, God, I wish I would have written that one?
Well, occasionally you get like it's a great, like a Nick Kershaw song or something, and you think, well, that's really clever. That's a really great song. It's a great arrangement. So da da dee da dee da. Wouldn't it be good if da 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 over there? Wouldn't it be good if we could?
Come on, everyone.
I mean, I tend to gravitate to kind of, school of melodic, if you like. Beatles, Crowded House, Squeeze, etc. Bit of Blur, bit of Pulp. Don't mind a bit of that. Oasis, maybe. But the more melodic stuff, rather than just kind of dance music, which kind of dulls my brain a bit. At some point, dance music just became all about the bass drum, and it's if you compare, the Bee Gees to somebody from New Orleans to the Neville Brothers, there's no contest, which is actually the best to dance to, but people never get exposed to. But people get exposed to disco, and it's just relentless. And the only way to really enjoy disco is to be out of your skull. I think ecstasy is probably the way to go.
Oh, I thought you said the band XTC, but all right. Well,
great band. I love XTC as well. I'll put those on the good list.
I'm convinced that Andy Partridge and Colin Moulding borrow heavily from you, given some of
did he?
Given some of the.
I'll go around his house. I know where he lives.
Yeah, I think they're in Swindon. Well, another Nick. You mentioned Kershaw, but Nick Drake. I mean, certainly somebody with whom I think there's more than just some parallels in the musical style, but perhaps a kindred spirit.
Yeah, I think maybe a kindred spirit. Yeah. Well, Nick always seemed, even for 1967, 68, very introverted. At a time when, I think because of drugs, people didn't necessarily say hello or talk to you. There's just this sort of understanding, you sort of nod as if, there was some shared experience you didn't even have to talk about, like life. Oh, yeah, you've got a life and I've got a life. Okay, that's fine. We don't need to talk about it. We just nod. So with Nick, it was hard to get even a nod out of him. We shared management. So I'd see him all the time, at the management offices or something. We had the same record company. I played in his records sometimes. He was a good friend of John Martin's, who was my neighbour for a while. So I might see him at John's house. He's a good friend of John Woods, our engineer. I might see him at John Woods' house. But Nick was a kind of a remote figure, and quite a difficult person. And he became remoter. And by the time of his third album, I thought, this is too uncomfortable to listen to. This is too painful to listen to. And I fear for his sanity and his life. But boy, did he make some great records, fantastic records. And again, like Sandy, I mean, so many people quote Nick Drake as an influence. I mean, all over the place. Here and in America, extraordinary influence. And there was a great review I just read from the Melody Maker, when his first album came out, and it described it as kind of a, sort of folk meets cocktail jazz. And I thought, oh boy, I bet you're sorry you said that one. Because again, someone whose legacy has just continued to grow and grow and grow.
And you have these revivals. I mean, in the US, Pink Moon was used in a Volkswagen commercial.
Yeah.
And we can have a completely different conversation about commodification of classic songs like that. But it opened his music to an entirely new audience and an appreciative one.
Yeah.
Before we go to Q&A, I was wondering if perhaps you wouldn't mind giving us another. But I do have one final question on my part. Your book says Fairport, folk rock, and finding my voice. Have you found it?
I should not be the judge of that.
Okay.
Or I'll get hate mail. Letters. I don't know. I think I'm not a bad singer these days. Actually, I think I'm quite.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm very happy singing my own music anyway. If I was singing excerpts from The Sound of Music, I might be compared to other people, which maybe unfavourably. But I can do a bit of light opera if you like. A bit of Gilbert and Sullivan. Okay, no. I'll play something. This is another story in the book where I describe being 15 years old and going to the Marquee Club and seeing all these great bands, seeing The Who on a Tuesday, The Move on a Monday, Spencer Davis on a Wednesday, and the Yardbirds on a Friday. And I might have seen Eric Clapton's last show with the Yardbirds before Jeff Beck came along, and of course we lost Jeff Beck just a month ago, maybe 2 months ago. I saw him a bunch of times, and he was an influence on me, on my playing. So I'll dedicate this to the memory of Jeff. And this is about the walk home. The Marquee, you could always do. I could always watch the first set and get the last bus or the last train home. If I stayed for both sets, it was very tempting to stay for both sets. I knew I'd have to walk home. At that point, it was 10 miles.
Which you did once.
Which I did a lot of. On a school night, it was a problem. That promising career in accountancy was looking increasingly shaky. It's called Walking the Long Miles Home. Oh, the last bus is gone. Oh, maybe I'm wrong, but that just doesn't exist. And the words that flew between me and you, I must be crossed off your list. So I'm walking the long miles home. I don't mind losing you. In fact, I feel better each step of the way. In the dark, I rehearse all the right things to say. I'll be home, I'll be sober by break of day. Walking along my home. Not a soul is around as I put more ground between me and you. And the whole town's asleep, or maybe they're deep in the old voulez-vous. So I'm walking along my home. I don't mind losing you. I've got the moon there for company each step of the way. Got the rhythm in my shoes, keep the blues away. When you ride Shanks's pony, you don't have to pay. Walking along my home, walk the miles. Oh, the party was grand, but I hadn't quite planned on staying so long. And while you accuse me, the hours confuse me, and my friends had all gone. So I'm walking along my town. I don't mind losing you, and there's nobody out but a cop on the bait. He's snoring so loud that he don't hear my fate. I just laugh to myself and move off down the street, walking along my town, walking along my town, walking along my town. Thank you.
Okay, we have a roving mic, so if anyone has any questions, and may I please request if we could have the house lights up, that way, thank you so much. That way I can actually see who's got their hands up. And we got a question up here, and then right after that we got a question right behind him, so to speak. Yes.
Hello, thanks very much. I'd be interested in persuasion. You said about singing your own words.
Yeah.
I know Tim Finn added it later after you did
Yeah.
it, but instrumental. Firstly, how do you feel about singing compared to Tim's version? And secondly, how did it come about?
Well, I wrote the tune for an Australian feature film, a romantic comedy. Why me, I said, for a romantic comedy. But I got the job anyway, and it was one of the main themes for the film. And Tim said, "Oh, I really like that tune. Could I put some words to it?" And originally we kind of worked together on the lyric, and then he said, "Oh, I'm going to go away and think about it and see what you think, what I come up with." And I thought what he came up with was very good. And I think uncredited, Neil Finn wrote the words for the bridge. So it's a family affair, as it were. But that's basically the story. And I'm very happy singing those words. I think they fit really well. And is it about Greta Skarki, we ask ourselves, which is possibly was about Greta Skarki.
Thank you.
All right, great. Gentleman right there in the Broodnell Social Club, sorry.
I saw you last Saturday at Glastonbury. Fantastic performance in the acoustic
good.
tent.
Yeah.
I just wondered if you've had any real good memories of Glastonbury, either by yourself or with Fairport.
I've always found it a bit overwhelming. Even the very early ones. I think the first one I did was about 1974, where it was just a sea of mud. I remember driving my Volvo estate, like basically through the crowd of people, and the crowd of people were standing in about, a sort of a World War I trenches worth of mud. It's probably about a foot deep, and I just about got my car through it, driving at sort of 2 miles an hour, nudging people out of the way. It was all very embarrassing, really, but I had to get out of there. I don't know. I mean, I've always been on one of the smaller stages, which I'm happy with. But I just find Glastonbury overwhelming. It's too much, too many people, and I know it's really an event, and if you talk to people there, they say, well, it's about the event, not necessarily about the music, which I find extraordinary in some ways. But it's become such a thing, and there's so much to do there. There's so many interesting places to go, and people love to see their friends. They love to meet new people. So if you are, half a mile from Elton John, that's still okay. It's still all right. Yeah, you've still got the experience, even if you can't actually, hear half the notes. So I was happy to be in the acoustic tent, which is a bit of its own world.
That's why you do have to go find
the
smaller stages.
Yeah,
such as the acoustic tent.
Well, where you've got, a maximum about 3,000 people. I think I played to about 2,000, and that was fine. Like a big folk club, really, isn't it? Very big folk club.
All right.
Yeah, but I see you've got a nice tan, and I hope you enjoyed yourself.
We have a question up here in the front.
You talk about 1967. And there was a group very similar to Fairport, Brian Auger and the Trinity with Julie Driscoll.
Okay.
And I just wondered if that kind of sound had had any influence. Because Julie Driscoll was using a lot Bob Dylan's work.
Yeah.
And it was very much like Fairport. And I think the writing was similar.
Yeah, I thought she was a great singer, Julie Driscoll. She had a really good style. But they were a lot jazzier than we were as a band. I mean, the similarity really was we both had girl singers at the time. But I would have seen them as something quite different. I must tell you, we were playing at the Cannes Music Festival in the south of France with Brian Auger, and I think that they were on first, and then we were just waiting to go on after them. And they were on the light-up revolving stage. So you could have a band in front and then another band at the back, but we were on this third stage over here. And so Brian Auger and the band start up, the organ, big jazz sort of number before Julie Driscoll comes on. So they play one song, applause, applause, applause. And then and they say, now please welcome to the stage Julie Driscoll. Julie Driscoll walks out at the exact moment that some wag decides to turn on the revolving stage. So Julie goes arse over tit, she goes whang, and the band start disappearing around the corner, and the cables to the organ get pulled out, and they're sort of looking frantically as they disappear out the back. That's my abiding memory of Brian Auger. I mean, they were a great band. I really think they were fantastic. They were from here, or do you think they were, no? Yes, no, man? Were they from around here, or no? No. North somewhere, okay, yeah, okay. It's a big place. Okay, well, thank you for the question.
All right, thank you. Sir.
I saw you last year in Hollywood Forever, a very strange venue, but about this size in North LA.
Right.
And I hadn't realized at the time that you'd actually moved out and become a Californian. Can you say a little bit about becoming a Californian?
Well, I became a Californian a long time ago. I know I'm not a Californian anymore. I probably moved there, it's chez les femmes. So I got married to a Californian in 1984, and partly moved there. But I've always spent a lot of time in the UK as well. I never really left. And then when I got divorced, I split up with my wife 7 years ago, and I moved my American base, as it were, to New Jersey, to the East Coast, because it's an easier hop to London, and it's a more convenient place to tour. So I stopped being a Californian, but I like California, and that's a strange venue, isn't it? It's a venue. It's an old Masonic lodge in the middle of a graveyard. And in the graveyard, you've got all these Hollywood stars, really famous people, and there's tours going around all the time. But at the time, that was a sort of the hip venue, and something you have to think about in LA is where is hip? You really do. Every single time you've got to think, okay, what's the hip venue? What's the hip restaurant? Or what's this? Angelinos will only go to a hip event, and they all expect to be on the guest list. Every single one of them. So these are two battles that we have every single time that we play in LA. But good question. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you. Yes, sir.
Hi. I remember you.
Oh, there you are. Okay. But a bit louder, please. Right into the mic, please.
1967.
The mic's not on or something. Is it? Did you switch it off?
Hello?
Yep.
There you are.
Don't press the button. I have this memory. My mate Ed's no longer with us. I want to confirm that in 1967 you came to Bradford before Christmas with Fairport Convention.
Yes.
Yeah?
Quite
And
possibly.
I have this memory. Only possibly. Because I remember you, somebody from the group, coming on and saying, look, we're not meant to be here tonight, but as we're here, we're going to play. And Ed and I, not surprisingly, thought you were absolutely fantastic.
Oh, good.
And the first thing we did when we came back for the next term was go to the Union shop and buy tickets for Fairport Convention.
Wonderful.
And you came back again. Do you have any memories of that?
No, not really. I remember that we played Bradford fairly frequently as Fairport. We played Bradford. We played Leeds a lot as well. We played a lot of universities in those days. And it occurs to me now that it was all subsidised by Harold Wilson's government. So I'm very grateful for that. The other place that I played with Linda, with my wife Linda, as an acoustic duo, was the Bradford Folk Clubs. And there was a wonderful singer called Dave Brady. Swan Arcade, remember Swan Arcade? Just this great three-piece a cappella band that did, sea shanties and God knows what. But Dave was just a force of nature. I think he moved to Cumbria eventually, but he was absolutely fantastic. And what a voice! I mean, he wouldn't need a microphone in the Albert Hall, basically. Extraordinary singer. And he had one arm. He rode his motorcycle quite fast, and he realised it was about to hit a brick wall. And so he stuck his arm out and grabbed a lamppost. So he had one arm. But he could play the guitar with one arm, and the concertina. How do you play guitar with one? Well, you basically strum with that finger. But he was such a character, such a nice man. I loved him. I haven't seen him for years and years and years. Hope he's still on the planet. Many years ago? Oh, well, my heart's broken. There you go. But anyway, they actually recorded one of my songs, a song called The Great Valerio, and it's probably my favourite cover of any song of mine that anyone's ever done. There you go.
Talking about venues, what was it like playing at Ali Pali?
Yes, that was was that yesterday? Day before yesterday?
Day before yesterday, yeah.
Okay, Ali Pali is Alexandra Palace in London, which was the home of the BBC from its beginnings in 1926 up until the 50s, I think, or maybe even 60s. So if you were watching Muffin the Mule or the Flower Pot Men, that was being broadcast from Ali Pali. And it's this weird place. It's this huge complex, a massive complex that looks right on a high spot right over London. And apart from the BBC, there was a massive exhibition hall. There's a skating rink still there. And there's a theatre which was closed for something like 60 years. And they reopened it a few years ago. And it's gorgeous. Wonderful, wonderful theatre. And in 1967, we've been talking a lot about 1967, haven't we? It was the home of the 14-hour Technicolor Dream, which is this big sort of psychedelic event, the first big psychedelic event in London. And in the exhibition hall, maybe 10,000 people, people smoking banana skins, light shows, never seen those before, showing old 20s films, silent films, 3 bands on at once. If you stood in the middle, you could hear all 3 bands. If you really wanted to hear a band, you had to get very close to the stage. But, it's Pink Floyd and Soft Machine and et cetera, et cetera. Sam Gopal, Arthur Brown, all the usual faces. But it was a real sort of turning point, I think, in certainly in London culture. That was a real eye-opener. I was at school. I went with my school friends. 67. I must have just been at school. Yeah, okay, yeah.
Well, we're at the end of our discussion. If you have any other questions, we will be having a book signing now just outside, which I'm sure you'd be able to go ahead and address those things. The book, again, is B-Swing, Fairport Folk Rock, Finding My Voice, 1967 to 1975. Of course, Richard Thompson. Richard, thank you.
Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this episode and would like to support the festival, please subscribe, share this episode with others, and leave a rating. Don't forget to mark your calendars as the Bradford Literature Festival returns for its 10th year from 28th of June to the 7th of July 2024.